I'm so sorry. This is awful and fucked. Fuck hurricanes, fuck climate change. I wish I could do something frowny face, black heart, frowny face.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Lovecraft Country, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the new HBO series, Lovecraft Country. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Ash Lafley.
Hi, y'all.
And this is our Book of Names edition, where we look back on all the top listener email and voicemail for the final week following the finale of Lovecraft Country. Please subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where Ash and I will continue to work with our good buddy Big D, Dick Ebert, and putting out our reviews of 80s and 90s movies. That is a year-round endeavor that we have never stopped doing while we were doing Lovecraft Country, but now we can kind of devote our time exclusively to that. So if you enjoy this podcast and you haven't listened to Shat the Movies, go ahead and check that out. It's at shatthemovies.com. Also, we're going to continue doing our Twitch stream where we do live streams, but also you can watch like the back episodes as well. That's at shatontv.com/Twitch. And we'll do one-off shows occasionally on different TV shows, such as like The Expanse, perhaps The Boys. We've done one on Raised by Wolves. And you can check all that out again at shatontv.com/Twitch. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, subscribing is great, subscribing to the podcast. But if you subscribe to our Twitch channel, that helps us out a lot. So if you can go to shatontv.com/Twitch and subscribe using Twitch Prime, you can actually use your Amazon Prime membership to give the podcast a little bit of money every month. It doesn't cost you anything. It comes straight from Amazon Prime. It's included in your membership. You get one subscription a month, and we'd really, really appreciate those extra dollars. Again, we made $0 doing Lovecraft Country, so any support that we can get to help the podcast going as we look toward future endeavors, we'd appreciate it a lot. Ash, it feels like forever since we got to hang out and talk Lovecraft Country, but it's only been a week since the show ended. Do you have any different feelings about the show now that you've had a little bit of time away from it?
I mean, not really. I mean, I think I appreciate the good and I accept the, maybe not as good. So no, I mean, I think it was a fine show. I don't really know where a season 2 would go. I know that Misha Green says she has a plan, but I personally don't see where it would go. And I would think I'd be fine with it being a one-off like Watchmen. I think that's a nice new trend in TV, especially in HBO. And I'd be pretty pleased if this was, the end of the story of Lovecraft, that it ends with Tick because it started with Tick.
And like you, I haven't really changed my position on the show. It doesn't look any different to me now than it did a week ago. But one thing that has changed was really the audience response to us. And I know we actually got a review on iTunes that was like, stop talking about yourselves. Nobody cares about your little dramas. Stop lecturing us. But, that's a lot of what the audience wanted to talk about. And so we were welcoming the conversation. Really, we go where you want to go as an audience. So we have several voicemails and emails this week, some of them talking about the show, some of them talking about the coverage. And I think the big thing that I've seen different is like this late outpouring of kindness toward us. And I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. And I think I actually tagged one of the emails on our board where we organize everything. And I said, Gene, where have these people been all season? Like, I was like, this is so nice. I feel like we could have gone an extra 5 episodes if these people had shown up. So thank you very much for writing in. We read, even if we don't read it tonight, we read every single email that we receive. We hear every kind or even the not so kind words, but we appreciate the kind, I think, most of all. So thank you so much for writing in. And we're glad to know we're not quite on the island. I think sometimes it feels like we're on.
So without further ado, we have lots to get to. So we're going to get right into it, not waste your time, and start with our first voicemail, which comes from a place not too far from Ash in small town, Texas.
Hey, Shat crew. I want to tell you that you're doing a hell of a job with the coverage of Lovecraft. It's been said that you guys aren't, feeling the Black experience, but I feel like you guys have done the research and have proven that you can cover just about anything. Ash, I want to say that's awesome. You're in my hometown of Houston, Texas. I'm not there anymore. I'm in Colorado, but it's good to hear that, you're culturally diverse. Lovecraft has really, really brought out some really weird emotions for me. First, I'll go with episode 3. Moving into a small community like Jasper, Texas. Let's see, I graduated high school in '98. We were in Houston, but we have family in the Jasper, Lufkin area. And the James Byrd thing happened. If you guys don't know about the James Byrd thing, go ahead and research. Put that on the air. Air out that laundry. I graduated from Yates High School. If that feels familiar to you, who was a couple of years ahead of me? George Floyd. He was a great football player, great tight end. Things like this are just really weird, especially the now gentrification of the neighborhoods that when I come back home, they don't look like they used to. Ash, you're familiar with the wards, in New Orleans, you guys have the famous Ninth Ward, Second Ward, things like that. In Houston, we have the Fifth Ward, the Third Ward. That's where my mom and dad grew up. They don't look like they used to. Not at all. They're actually clean. So it's really weird to go back and not see the same things that you see in Third Ward, Fifth Ward, Sunnyside, things like that.
I do think that James Byrd Jr. is something that a lot of people don't know about. It's another face in a sea of murder victims that exist in our country. And so since you asked for us to air it, I mean, we can air it. And I do apologize. I'm kind of talking off the cuff here. We try to be more organic on these episodes. So I'm kind of just, I don't have it prepared. But basically, the idea is that James Byrd Jr. he was a late 40-year-old man living in Jasper, Texas. Jasper, Texas, it's about 140 miles from Houston. And so it's pretty small. It has about 7,500 people in it, maybe 8,000. And it's pretty near the Texas-Louisiana border. So it's your typical small town Texas. And one night, these 3 guys, they offered to give James Byrd a ride. And then once he got in their car, they started to beat him. They chained him to the back of their pickup truck and they dragged him for over 3 miles. One of the things that stands out to me when I remember reading about it was in 1998, was that he was alive, they think, for at least 2 of the miles before he died. So it was absolutely a gruesome, horrific way to die. And the 3 individuals that kind of orchestrated the whole thing, they were well-known racist, white supremacist. And the thing that I think makes this situation so frightening, other than the fact of it just being a horrific crime, is that the city of Jasper at the time had an African-American mayor. And they had a lot of Black leaders in leadership positions. So this is not your typical small town Texas where it's just like completely white, right? Like this was actually, considered to be a fairly progressive town, especially considering the type of makeup it was. And that, for me at least, makes it even more disturbing that this was allowed to happen there. And fortunately, the killers were punished. 2 of them have been executed. I don't know if the third is on death row or if he got life in prison, but at least 2 of the 3 have been executed as a result of they were sentenced to death and were put to death. Texas, we have the shortest track from conviction to execution, which normally I think is a really horrible thing, but at least hopefully the families have some sense of justice from at least them, carrying out sentences that the court system decided. But I think it was a great point. I think that it's good for us to remember that this doesn't just happen in Lovecraft country, that this happens everywhere, and it's happened all throughout history. And I think we could probably pick any year that's ever existed since the 1800s, and we could find, examples like this to talk about, and it's good to remember them.
Yeah, and that year is just, I mean, that's chilling. 98. Like, that's not that long ago. I was an adult already when it happened. This isn't the distant past. This is our very, very recent past and our present. So thanks so much for calling in. Really appreciate that historical perspective. And our next voicemail comes from a repeat caller who's been with us since the beginning of this season. It's Tawana in Bermuda.
Lovecraft Country. Hi, everyone. It's Tawana. And I just wanted to say thank you for your coverage, Shat crew, on Lovecraft Country. It has been enjoyable and thought-provoking listening to you. I was really disappointed by the final episode. If I'm honest, a bit confused. I felt like it was all over the place. I couldn't keep up. Admittedly, it was after a lobster and champagne 4-course dinner, so that probably had something to do with it. And I also didn't have subtitles, so I perhaps need to go back and read it again. I'm sorry, watch it again and read the subtitles. But yeah, I just felt it was a bit disjointed, and I was honestly very upset with the treatment of the Ruby character. I thought it was a missed opportunity. I thought that the showrunners actually, in a staggering lack of awareness, in choosing to dispose of Ruby off screen and not emphasizing the selfishness of Letty's behavior and Tick's behavior when it came to Jima, as well, in terms of, okay, I need you now, so now we're cool. And then you must get on board. And I thought that the treatment that the showrunner showed Ruby compared to Lassie, really acted, perhaps even unintentionally, colorism, the treatment of women who don't adhere to European standards of beauty, and even queer women. And so I was really, really disappointed by that. And just, like I said, a staggering lack of awareness. I appreciated that the show got us thinking and talking, and I was excited to watch it every week. And I think that it was great content to make us think and also to entertain us. But have to say, disappointed with just the entire final episode, to be quite honest. Michael K. Williams, I thought, was astounding. I just, his character arc, I really appreciated. But yeah, I did not understand Diana's motivation at the end. Her reconciliation with her mom seemed forced. So yeah, I'm not a fan of the final episode. It pains me to say, I'm really upset by the treatment of Ruby. Anyway, I will be listening for your next show that you decide to review. And you've got a fan in me. Keep up the good work. And yes, all the best.
I feel like Tawana is living all of our best lives. She's in Bermuda. She's having champagne and 4-course meals. She's, highly educated, watching Lovecraft Country and giving us insight into it. That's a life I wouldn't mind living.
Yeah, and in a way, it makes me a little nostalgic for the season when we have these repeat callers, because they call and I feel like they've been on the journey with us. And Tawana, I totally agree. I was disappointed as well. I agree it was all over the place. And I think you summed it up nicely that there were some good things and there were some bad things. And hey, we're glad to have you as part of our Shat family.
The next caller is Eugene.
Hi, Shat on TV. This is Eugene. I have been listening to you guys for a while. Went back and, started listening to some of your archive material. But this is for Lovecraft Country, full circle. I finished listening to the review, and while I feel like all opinions are validated to your life experience, it was really shocking because since this series started from even Watchmen prior, I have had a problem with real historical events being used in fictional entertainment because I feel like history is so one-sided here in America, and African-American history is really just American history and not being taught as such. Hence why people assumed when the Tulsa Massacre first appeared in Watchmen that this was an act of fiction. Now reappearing in a more lengthy storytelling format with an entire episode in Lovecraft Country, The trauma and death still, while there, does not feel fully realized. But this is about the final episode, so I'll get to the point. Why I do find the fact that Dee killed Christina unsettling, because I do not believe a child should be thrust into such violence. And that's really a question that I would have for the showrunner. Was there something else in the book? Did everybody read the book that was given to Dee from the future? Because now I'm beginning to wonder, was there a coded message for Dee in those pages? Is that why she really shoved the book into Atticus' hand and then threw him back in the portal, not letting him know that, hey, give this book to my past self so I can become future black, magic Hitler lady and, oppress white people? Because for there to have been this illusion that white people were rioting in the future and robot arm lady, gave me a book, threw me back to a portal, I feel that there's more story material there.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, Eugene. This is an interesting one because we're really talking about two things here. One is the idea of the weight of historical events when they're put into a sci-fi setting or a dramatic setting on HBO, and the other one is really talking about the D thing. And I'll start with the historical thing. I totally agree in this sense. One of the things that's unfortunate about, I think, modern storytelling, and I would say modern storytelling in the last few years, is that we try to employ some of the newest forms of storytelling and some of our own, I would say, more recent, more advanced ideologies when we're telling stories. And so, for instance, something that might be done stylistically or something that might be done thematically to enhance the messaging of a scene may detract from the reality of the scene. And especially when you put sci-fi in there, right? Sci-fi by its nature is fantastic. And so when you mix that in with actual history, you do sometimes get varying results. As visceral and as explosive as those Tulsa scenes were, I guarantee you that no one would call that real, right? In the sense that it did not feel real. I would give you an example of, let's say, Saving Private Ryan, right? Saving Private Ryan, and I'm not trying to say that a white art form is any better than a black art form, but I'm saying that Saving Private Ryan, I feel like those Omaha Beach scenes, yes, of course it's a film. There's still drama happening there, but you really got a sense that of the despair and the reality and the helplessness that was happening there. And I don't know that we got that from these scenes in Tulsa. In fact, I would argue that Watchmen was more effective in showing the feeling of these scenes by not trying to insert itself stylistically in those scenes.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting to the way Watchmen did it, 'cause you can't help but compare, right? And Watchmen did it from the perspective of a child that we knew the adult of, right? And I think that obviously Lovecraft did very much the same idea with looking at it from like Montrose's childhood and George's childhood. But I think Watchmen was more effective because it didn't show any change to it. It just showed like the horror of what happened. And I think with Tulsa, we got that redemption piece, which I know is great to have and made some people feel good. I guess it's the difference of people love Schindler's List or they love Inglourious Bastards, right? Like which one do they like? And I do think you can like both. Like I'm not saying it's like both camps, but I think you've got people who think about history like Schindler's List and that it is sacred, right? And then you've got people who think about it like Inglourious Bastards, where they want to see the Nazis just be slaughtered because that's what they wish had happened.
As for the subject of Dee killing Christina, there has been a lot of buzz, and even on this podcast, we'll get to it, a lot of buzz about kind of theories explaining that. And yes, the robot hand kind of pushing out of the portal as we saw Atticus kind of ejected back from the future. I'd say they bought themselves a ticket to tell this story, that there's probably more there than we understand or that we've analyzed. And so I'm willing to sort of reserve judgment on that and say, yeah, it's not necessarily illogical. And in fact, although I don't agree with your characterization of Dee being some sort of a black Hitler magic lady or whatever you said. I do appreciate the fact that you suggested that something she read in the book motivated her actions. And that's something I hadn't considered before. Thanks, Eugene, for your voicemail. Next up, we have Dr. J, another Texan, this time in Austin.
Hey, guys. This is Dr. J from down here in Austin, giving you a call about Lovecraft Country. Just watched or listened to your podcast on the season finale. Wanted to say a few things on it. I honestly think that Christina, as Ruby, put the invulnerability spell back on Letty deliberately before she pushed her out the window. It's simple. You make her invulnerable and then you kill her. You know she's going to be fine. You've upheld your promise to your lover, and you still get to go through with your plan. So it goes back to that. This isn't a personal thing. Like, she didn't want to kill Letty. She just needed her out of the way for a little bit. So I do think she did that in order to honor Ruby. And that's the part I wanted to see, because it happened so quickly that I do think that her and Ruby loved each other. And I do think that cost her something to turn into Ruby like that. And it was so fast that I don't think we got to see that part of it. So that was interesting. But I don't think there's tinfoil. I think it's just that. I think it was Christina, and she said the words to get her invulnerable again. I also think you guys are doing a really good job here. I'm a white guy in Texas and trying to learn things and be an ally, and you guys present this stuff in a way that I get a hold of, and I can wrap my head around, and I can broaden my own perspective on it. And, you know, HBO did a fine job with Watchmen and introduced me to the Tulsa riot, so that every time they talked about Tulsa, it was this big thing for me. But I wouldn't have known that had I not watched these shows that may or may not be for me. But I feel like you guys watching the shows, talking about the shows, taking the time to have a discussion about them is a really good thing for all of us, even if it's not the us that maybe the showrunners had in mind. We all need to learn about this stuff, and we all need to know it. So keep doing what you're doing. I also got to say, I took a little break this year. It's been a really, really tough year. Lost my business. Some other things have been happening. Been home with the kids, going a little nutty here, and had to get off social media because of all the crazy people out there. And I feel like I'm so grateful for Lovecraft Country to bringing me back to your podcast. I'm back into the Shat the movies. It's like being away from friends for a while. But you guys keep doing what you're doing. I love your podcast. Going through all of this last summer's Shat content right now, and can't wait for more. I also still have the Sadio ready for everybody out here in Austin, Texas. So when you guys make it this way, we'll do it. All right. Thanks, you guys, for everything. Bye.
Dr. J is what I thought Texans would be like before I actually visited Texas. I was like, oh man, Texans seem incredible. No offense, Ash. I mean, listen, I consider you a New Orleanian, so
Yeah.
But he really is like that. Just come on by my way, and I'm an open-minded, pioneering individual, sort of thing. And so I really, really do appreciate that. And he actually did write in after this voicemail, and just as a testament to the guy's humility, he wrote in and said, I was getting a bit sentimental, and then he starts to really take stock of life, and he says, no, I'm actually quite fortunate. I sold my business and prevented bankruptcy, and then I got to stay home with my children for the entire year, which meant that they didn't have to attend school in person until January, and that we're all together and we're all safe, and that's such a blessing to me. So Dr. J, you sound like a really awesome dude.
Absolutely. It warms my heart to hear voicemails like this, because we feel the same way when we're away from the pod, when we're away from each other, when we're away from Twitter because we were banned unnecessarily for 50 days. It is like returning to family, to a group of friends that we've all made, and especially in this post-pandemic world. I will say this. I read that the showrunners, because I think, Dr. J, I love your theory here. I think your theory is awesome. I would love it if Christina and Ruby truly did love each other, and that there was a little sliver of good in Christina, because I think that anti-heroes are so much more interesting than just straight villains, right? But unfortunately, the showrunners have said that the reason there was that little clip when Gia is, doing her foxtail sucker thing, and we see Ruby mumbling something over a sleeping Letty, they said that that is meant to tell us that Ruby looked at the spell book and that she cast the invulnerability spell back on Letty before she died. So
Boo.
I know it sucks. I think that it's much more interesting to think that Christina did it as like a final paying homage, or my theory that maybe Ruby's still alive somewhere. But I think that we got the confirmation that Ruby really is dead, and she's the reason her sister isn't.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. J, for your awesome theory that I liked a lot better than the truth. But Ash, also thanks for the education. I did not know that. And our final voicemail comes from another repeat caller. This is Jeff in Alaska.
Hey, guys. It's Jeff in Alaska. Long time, third time. And I'm going to harken back to my first call earlier in the Lovecraft season when I was out on the ledge regarding the anachronistic music. And it just, again, I had to think back to your breakdown, which was, I don't want to say brilliant. It was just very well received. It was helpful. Hearing the breakdown on Shaboom, and of course, the Blind Willie breakdown on the fire, which, by the way, also, I wonder, on a sidetrack, if that links in with the Genesis song Carpet Crawlers, with the wise and foolish virgins, their bodies glowing bright. That seems like something Peter Gabriel would do with a biblical reference. Anyway, I digress. Obviously, the showrunners at Lovecraft Country put a lot into the music and everything else in this show, which is why I find it mystifying that they wouldn't. There's so much music that they could have used that was groundbreaking from that period. And I mean, we could just go with the surface with Chuck Berry, Little Richard, but dig down a little deeper. You get Johnny Lee Hooker and Howling Wolf. All these guys just blew the doors open on popular music that we listen to now. So the glaring thing that just sticks out to me was using Patti LaBelle, which, as a Philadelphia native, I am all about Lady LaBelle. Don't get me wrong, but you could have easily put in a Little Richard song there and re-edited, and that would have just been the same vibe. So that's it. Thanks so much for a great season. I really, it really helped listening to you guys and getting through all this external noise. Have a great one.
I don't disagree. I think that you bring up a great point here that there was some missed opportunities maybe with potential music choices. I do think they were going for more of a modern artsy feel to try to combine modern music with these. This is a terrible comparison, and I'm sure somebody on YouTube is going to call me ridiculous, but what's new? It's like the movie A Knight's Tale. Do you remember that, Gene? With Heath Ledger.
Oh, Heath Ledger? Yeah, I do. With
all
Chaucer.
Of a sudden, he's got his big, jousting stick, and he's, putting it down, and he's got the horse going, and then it's, we will, rock you, right? Like it's Queen. And then they do some weird dance later. Like that never worked for me. And I felt the same way here, that it just didn't work.
That dance was hot.
The dance was hot. The dance I'll give you. And Shannon Sossaman, come on, she's a great 90s, early 2000s. Like, she looks great. But
Paul Bettany, wasn't he in that?
Yes, he plays,
what's
his name?
Chaucer.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So it's just, I think it's either you like it or you don't, right? You like it or you don't. And I'm with you, Jeff. I didn't, but I know a lot of people did.
I just appreciate that Jeff understands the difference between Peter Gabriel Genesis and fucking Phil Collins Genesis, because Phil Collins ruined that band and Peter Gabriel is a goddamn genius.
Well, and I also appreciate that Jeff knows that your ego needs to be, kept in check with that. I don't want to say brilliant, but definitely well received. I appreciate you, Jeff, because, we don't need Gene getting, insufferable here.
It's true. Too late. Jeff, thank you so much for your voicemail. And now we'll move on to our email. And by the way, guys, if you have voicemail for us, still please call us at 914-719-SHAT. We'll still listen to those. And they might even make it onto Shappy Hour, which is our Friday cocktail party on Twitch live. So keep calling in. And you can also write us at hosts@shatontv.com, which brings us to the voicemail. So Ash and I had a very hard time choosing the email that would go in this week. So many great entries. And Ash, why don't you do the honors?
All right, so our first one comes from Susan from Maryland, one of our very good Twitch friends, Suze Mabrew. And she writes, even though Dee's story didn't really get much focus until towards the end of the season, let's look at the season's events through her eyes. Her father went on his last road trip and was murdered. Only explanation given was a white sheriff killed him. Her mother thought George's death was suspicious and took her to the burnt remains of the house where her comic book survived the fire. Her best friend was horrifically murdered by white men, and she attempted to attend the funeral only to be tracked down by Lancaster, another white police sheriff, and was asked about magic. She stormed angrily into the lodge with questions and subsequently became haunted, then cursed by the two Uncle Tom's Cabin characters, all the while asking adults if they saw them too, and is never believed. By the time she recovers from the curse, she has experienced sadness, confusion, anger, fear, and isolation, to name a few. She then fully releases her rage on her mother for leaving her and not being there during the most difficult part of her life to date. The rage is further fueled when she learns that the curse, aka magic, is to blame for her deformed arm and she cannot draw anymore. The final nail in Christina's coffin came when she saw the newspaper headline indicating Emmett's murderers were acquitted and would not be held accountable. Now, outlining all these events, I fully understand that when Dee gets told of Christina's part into all of this and why they are going on the road trip, she absolutely blames her as the reason for all her misery, including her father's death. So when she comes across a pinned Christina underneath the rubble, taking matters into her own hands, so to speak, is an outlet for her rage. And therefore, Dee kills her with the robot arm that replaced her cursed one. This new robot arm was definitely empowering because it reflected how she overcame the crippling effects of magic. But using that power to kill Christina was extremely unnerving for a few reasons. One, the obvious being a child committing murder. Two, she lost her childhood innocence and grew up immediately from the viewer's perspective. And three, the foreshadowing of her continuing to follow such a destructive path. Lastly, her story also points out that while practically every other character has been able to kick ass or murder throughout the season, she is the only one who really didn't get a chance to physically take it out on anyone. Maybe spitting on the sheriff counts here? This is the season's way of showing us how all that trauma pushed her to the edge and murdering is where she fell off the cliff, in essence leaving her childhood behind. Part of the show's point here is that many Black children have to grow up very quickly in the society. And while not all turn to murder when they have past negative experiences, Diana's trauma should not be discounted either, and it helps explain her mindset when trying to understand that final scene. I hope that my thoughts might align with what the writers intended, or perhaps this interpretation aligns with others' understanding of the show too. Catch you all in the next Shappy Hour. Susan from Maryland, aka Suze Mabrew.
This is so smart, Susan. I'm so glad you wrote in to put this in perspective. When you lay out the case like that, I mean, of course, it was always justified, but it also makes a lot of sense from a narrative perspective. I'm not a big fan of like flashback scenes. I always feel like it's the show pandering to us or telling us something we already know. But could you imagine that instead of the Gia scenes that she was seeing, those visions of all the history leading to us shown in those like corny, almost thought bubbles on screen, if instead we have Dee crouched over Christina's helpless body with her hand around her throat, and she remembers all of those moments. And we see that, and then it culminates in her cracking Christina's neck, crushing her throat. That to me is a much more powerful scene. But the case that you make absolutely makes sense. And I can't help but wonder, and this is an indictment of myself here, that if this were a white male character, would I still feel the same way? Or would it be me saying, oh, well, that's a young man getting justice for his family, right? Instead, I'm saying, oh, gosh, ruining her innocence. And we never even got to know this girl. And now she's become a killer. Very, very interesting thing to think about, and something that will resonate with me for a while as I wrestle with it.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. I had read a review of this episode that said that Dee, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that Dee was going down a darker path and potentially the only path that she could go down, like the necessary path. And I think that's what you're hitting on here, Susan Moreau. I think that you know that I'm not a proponent of violence. I'm such a, like, even like Jean, like with your Krav, like I can't hit anything. Like, I mean, it makes me feel really guilty to hit anything, but like, I get that violence is necessary sometimes. And I think that that's what they're showing us here. And I don't know how I feel about it still. I'm still wrestling with the idea of like how her character got there. I think it's kind of clunky. I think the path could have been laid out maybe a bit better, but I think it's a great idea. And if that is the case, then I think it's brilliant. So the next one comes from a new writer, Atalaka from Georgia. And they write, "Hello, Jean and Ash. I must admit, I have become such a fangirl of not just Lovecraft Country, but your podcast as well. Yours is one of 3 companion podcasts that I follow, HBO's Official, yours, and one out of England. Each offers a different perspective on the show, but yours by far is the one I enjoy the most. From day one, your approach, open-mindedness, willingness to learn, and overall general attitude keeps me coming back week after week. The effort y'all make to educate yourselves and your listeners make me hopeful that others will see we have more commonalities than we do differences. I wanted to suggest that you read The Burring by Tim Madigan. Although your coverage on the Tulsa Massacre was awesome, I wanted to talk more about that and was disappointed we had to talk about the show. The book should be your next stop if you are truly, generally seeking to know and understand the entire story. Anyway, all that to say how much I have enjoyed and look forward to your show every week. Ash, I wish I would have had a professor like you in school. Did I hear you have a podcast where you break down literary classics? I would love to follow that. What is the name of it? Continue doing what y'all do. Be blessed and safe. First timer and fan for life. Atalaka from Georgia." Oh man, I wish I had a podcast where I broke down literary classics. I feel like you and me and maybe Jean would be the entire listening audience, but I think it would be pretty awesome.
It's funny that you should mention literary classics too, because this week, as we've kind of started winding down Shat on TV, I've been doing a lot of volunteer voter protection shifts. So I go to polling stations. I'm certified by the county, and I have to sit there for 12 hours and make sure, for instance, if somebody who's Spanish speaking who wants a Spanish ballot and is being denied one, make sure they get one, because I live in Maricopa County where they have a right to one, right? Or making sure that someone who doesn't have their ID with them can still vote in a provisional ballot. It's very important work, but there's a lot of downtime. And so, Ash, I sat there for 12 hours the other day, and I read an entire book, and I was like, I remember this. I remember reading uninterrupted. This is so amazing. And so one of the most exciting aspects of being done with Shat on TV, at least for a little while, is to be able to return to my number one love, which is reading. As much as we enjoy doing these shows with you guys, reading is where it's at, man.
Which is why let us go ahead and announce now that Shat on Books will be coming to you in January of 2021, hosted by G. Lyons and Ashley Schlafly. Right?
Well, I mean, except it's going to compete with the hit TV show American Gods, which is also coming out in January. And I know everyone is very, very excited.
It will have as large of a listening audience as our Shat on Books.
All 3 of us. Except for the King Bee might actually listen to the books one. He's not going to listen to American Gods. But Atalaka, as you were speaking about that attitude toward learning, though, I think that's a very important call out, in the sense that I am not an expert in anything that we were shown on Lovecraft Country. And I feel like, although we try to speak as authoritatively as possible on these topics, at times even being accused of lecturing, we are in the learning phase. And I really can't speak for Ash, but I am in the learning phase. And so for me, this is an education as well. And one of the most exciting aspects of it has been interacting with our audience, who is women of color, who is sci-fi nerds, people who can tell me more about the things that we're seeing on screen. And it's important for us to have that collaboration with the audience to really understand what it is that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm certainly still learning as well, and will continue to do so. So thanks so much. All right, up next, we've got one from Doob, and it says, "Don't hold back." Hello, Shat Crew. I think we were all disappointed with HBO and what they did with Lovecraft Country. I love sci-fi, and the fact that we had source material for true sci-fi from an African-American angle was very promising. However, bad is bad, and we should not be afraid to call it out when it turns south. Ash and Jean, the fact that you got grief due to the fact that you are not of African descent is bull. You should not feel like you have to hold your punches. I just caught up with the instant reaction, and I hear Ash say, "This isn't created for us." The show is on HBO, not BET. So this show is created for everyone to have an opinion on and to enjoy. African Americans protecting this show would be like protecting OJ and Michael Jackson. The finale was horrible. The storytelling was awful. The filming was good, and the actors did the best they could with bad material. The best episode was the Korean episode, which says something. Well, I am done ranting, Ash. Do not hold back. And as an African American, you have a pass to go after this stinking pile of crap. Love all you do and keep it up, Doob.
So Doob is one of our Twitch viewers as well. And thanks so much for hanging out with us both on the podcast and on Twitch, Doob. And, I don't think that we held our punches per se, but I really want to go back to a realization I had during this season. And for me, it was just understanding that it's not necessarily, we keep using the phrase, "this is not for us," or "this was not made for us," but it's just really that understanding that in order to be highly, highly specialized, highly specific, and to resonate very strongly with a niche audience, sometimes you will take measures that don't resonate with the whole audience. And I think that really is what makes art superb, right? So one way to think about it is, okay, I'm a member of, I guess, goth culture. I'm a goth. I like goth industrial music. And I understand it's not for everybody, right? And so if somebody's like, "Oh, it sounds like a broken washing machine," or like, "This guy sounds super gay." And I go, "Yeah, that's the idea. That's why I like it. And you can fuck off. It's not for you." And so I don't think it's necessarily a racial thing, but rather a cultural thing. And in that sense, I'm perfectly okay with someone saying, "Hey, listen, you didn't get parts of this show because those parts were not made to resonate with you. You don't have the necessary components to even grasp that note. You're deaf to that note." And I go, "Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm okay with that." So although I appreciate the license to not hold back, although it was expressly granted to Ash, I will say that I do understand there are parts of the show that I naturally just will not get. And I'm okay with that.
I am too. I mean, you know my opinion. I think that sometimes it's that I'm just not meant to get it because I don't have the life experience to get it. And sometimes it's just shitty. And I don't know which one it is here, but I didn't like a lot of it, but I appreciate, I'll tell you, Doob, you were the one that I just mentioned a second ago. I was like, I left a note to Jean and I was like, "Dude, this dude's awesome. I wish every listener had been like this whole fucking time." So thanks for the license. I appreciate it. And I will feel free to say that parts of it were in your words, a stinking pile of crap, and other parts I like. So, I feel like I have permission now. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Show up on Shappy Hour this week and we'll raise a toast to you.
Yeah.
To do.
All right, so the next one comes from Tracy, and she writes, "Something I noticed early on, and I imagine you did as well, I just haven't heard it mentioned, is that the monsters and magic created by our racist characters seem more likely to kill the creator than the intended target. In the first episodes, we learned the Shoggoths were basically guard dogs. They killed the racist officers, and our heroes escaped. Later, we see the ghost in Letty's home destroy the ghost of their creator. Well, not in every episode, in most, this is the case. Even in the end, Christina is destroyed by the magic she desired, and Diana's robotic arm, which she wouldn't have had if Christina had chosen to reverse her curse. I think this is an example of how, while we may believe her hate is a weapon against others, more often than not, we are the ones injured by it. Even now in our own country, we have white supremacists who believe they are at war with people who they see as taking their country from them. The actions of this group have lit a fire that, if not squelched by the rest of us, could easily bring down the very country they feel they are defending. I think this is one of the big lessons of Lovecraft. I may be wrong because I am usually a distracted viewer and maybe I missed something. So please set me straight if that's the case. Thanks so much for this podcast. I look forward to hearing from you guys every week. Oh, and one more thing. I just saw a Netflix preview for a movie with Wunmi Masaku just in time for Halloween. Maybe you could cover that as well. Keep doing what you're doing, Tracy. So I'll say this, Tracy. I know you said that you imagine we did as well. Spoiler alert, I didn't. I did not notice this as a recurring theme. I definitely noticed it in maybe like the ending episode, right? But I went back and kind of thought about the other episodes, and you're right. This was a recurring theme throughout. And, it's kind of like that old saying, like the hate you give, you get. Right? But if you put it out there and it's negative, it comes back, whether you believe in karma, whether you just believe that people are good people or not. And I think that this is true. And I'm embarrassed to say I read something on BuzzFeed, but I did. I read something on BuzzFeed News yesterday, and it was really frightening. It was all these tweets between these different white supremacist groups and different text messages that BuzzFeed apparently got a copy of and read. And it sounds anachronistic in and of itself because it doesn't sound like this is something that should be being said or being found in 2020, right? Like it sounds like something from the 1960s or from the era of Lovecraft Country. And a lot of these guys are now having really terrible things happen. And I think that it's the same reason that we're seeing here, that often we think we hate other people, but really there's a lot that we hate about ourselves that allow us to show so much hate.
I'm with you on that, Ash. I also did not pick up on it, but Tracy has a really, really good point. And when you think about it, actually, the entire premise of this TV show and the novel from when we started was this flipping of Lovecraft on its head, connecting that eldritch horror with the horrors of racism. And one of the really big themes of Lovecraft, or even that cosmic horror in general, is this idea of meddling with things that are beyond humanity, or meddling with like forbidden knowledge, right? If you think about it, racism in and of itself is exerting power over another group of people out of thin air. I mean, magic really in itself, right? That there's no actual basis for it. There's no science behind it, right? It is just a form of magic, right? A horrible form of magic, but it is essentially this supernatural phenomenon, right? Where it is this make-believe, this enforcement of ideas. And so when you think about it, if you're going to flip Lovecraft on its head, you also flip that idea on its head, right? That forbidden knowledge can backfire onto the people who are using it for their power. It's an incredibly astute observation, Tracy, and I really appreciate you writing in.
All right, the next one that we have is from our good friend Steve, the fitness professional that we all know and love, Whitcomb.
Captain Hot Sauce.
Captain Hot Sauce. And he writes, I love the Lovecraft Country ending. And I don't know if he said it that way, but I'm sorry, that's just how I read it.
I actually wrote that title, so it's the way I said it. And I said it, I love the Lovecraft Country ending.
I mean, that's how you talk to him. You're like, I love it. So he writes about how he loved the Lovecraft Country ending. Hey, Ash and Jean, shocker here. I love the episode. I know, a surprise. Jean has joked I love every episode, and that's true. Could the show have done better with more seasons? Yeah, probably like Game of Thrones season 8 should have been 3 seasons. I liked a lot of the parts. The last 25 minutes kept me on the edge of my seat saying, holy shit. I liked how it wrapped up, even if we don't get a second season. I thought season 1 was pretty good. Did it have issues? Sure, but I was able to look past them and enjoyed it. Thanks for covering the show. As I know, I asked you guys to cover it the first time I saw the trailer. Please do a one-off of The Boys. P.S. Keep your eyes out for Wheel of Time, possibly the greatest fantasy series ever written, and I have high hopes for the TV show that comes out next year. Stephen Whitcomb, health fitness professional.
Steve, I'm so jealous of your positive attitude and your productivity. I mean, this is a guy who will like ride his bike 40 miles after doing a morning workout for everybody on Zoom, and then like read an entire book and then also watch an entire TV series and think it's all just great. You might be the anti-me, Steve. But in this sense, I think it's okay to enjoy Lovecraft Country. And I'm glad that it resonated with you, that the action had you hooked. And I think that this show did sit well with a lot of the viewing audience. If you look on Twitter, if you look on Facebook, there was a lot of positivity for Lovecraft Country, including the finale. So listen, we've said it before, we don't want to yuck anybody's yum. And I think that it's great that you enjoyed it. I will pick a bone with you on Game of Thrones season 8. You wanted that to be 3 seasons, my friend? I mean, yes, there was a lot of jetpacking, but 1 season of season 8 was enough for me.
Agreed.
As for Wheel of Time, the greatest fantasy series ever, we're going to have to talk about it because you were not wrong about Raised by Wolves. And I'd love to hear more about Wheel of Time. Perhaps you can convince us.
Our final email comes from James in Jacksonville, Florida. Hi guys, this is James from Jacksonville, Florida, 40-year-old black male. Just want to say that I love your podcast. I've been listening since Game of Thrones and also listen to Westworld and Watchmen. They're all excellent in my opinion. My question is, what's the next show you guys are going to do a podcast on? That way I'll know what to be looking for and what to watch. Thanks again for all you guys do. And that comes from James from Jacksonville.
So, James, first of all, thank you so much for sticking with us through Game of Thrones and Westworld and Watchmen. We are still kind of in the planning phase right now of what we're going to do next. But I know for a fact that we're going to continue doing our Twitch streams at shatontv.com/Twitch, and that we'll continue doing Shat the movies. We are booked actually through next summer of 2021. So that's going to keep going strong. So definitely check those out. And you can see all the movies that we're going to be doing in advance at shatthemovies.com. As for TV, I have been talking with the King Bee about saddling up for season 3 of American Gods. We had a lot of fun, just 2 old friends. We've been friends for 25 years now, doing that show together. It's a great way to get them out of the house and also just to have an excuse to eat burritos. But we watch American Gods and record it. It's a little bit less of a commitment than Lovecraft Country. Is certainly less cerebral. Season 3 promises to be an absolute dumpster fire. So I'm really, really excited about maybe reviewing it half tongue in cheek. So that's one we'll be doing. And then Big D has expressed interest in doing The Stand. I don't know if that's going to be a thing, but you'll definitely want to follow us on social media, mostly on Twitter. And that'll let you know. Again, we're at Shat the Movies and at Shat on TV. And just keep on there and we'll let you know what's going on. But hopefully we'll have something for you soon. All right, and that wraps it up. 13 episodes of Lovecraft Country coverage. Ash, I can't thank you enough for sticking with me this whole time. I know that it was a grind. You've switched jobs. You've gone through a pandemic. I've watched your children grow up. I've gotten to see Tom half naked. It has been an interesting couple of months, and I couldn't have done this without you. So thanks so much for doing Lovecraft Country with me.
Yeah, I think this is the love part of the pod, which I love. We did this on Westworld too. I absolutely have enjoyed it. I mean, it definitely was a slog at times just because I think we were not expecting some of the craziness that we experience, but I think we've grown from it. I think we're better podcasters because of it, if I want to be totally honest. I think our skin that was already quite thick has gotten even thicker, which I don't think is a bad life skill to have. And I just think the world of you still. And that's what I love the most, is that's how I know that we're real friends now, is that even going through all of this, like, I still like you a whole lot. And I think I like you even more. I think that you're incredibly smart and you're an amazing podcaster and you're the best teammate, because I certainly dropped the ball a couple of times because of that job move and because of the kids. And you're awesome. And thank you too, because I wouldn't have wanted to do it with anybody else. I'll tell you that.
That's the key to being a good friend, everybody. Be underemployed and don't reproduce. That's the way to do it.
Which is exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah, that was it.
Seriously, I think the most exciting part of this upcoming winter and holiday season is, like, I'm just imagining you and me doing whatever the fuck we want, and then once a week just getting together and recording one movie podcast. It's going to be amazing.
It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be amazing. And to everybody out there, please know we appreciate you. Check us on Twitter, contact us. A lot of you guys follow us on Instagram. Like, we'll see you. We'll talk to you. We'll see you on Twitch. We'll see you on the interwebs. And please, if you haven't subscribed to Shat the Movies, it really is a great place to get your Gene and Ash fix and your Big D fix too. We're having a lot of fun over there. I think we're doing some really fun pods and we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and currently out is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, and it is a really, really fun one if you're a Dr. Loomis fan. We got a lot of love for Dr. Loomis. And then, of course, Shappy Hour, we are doing haunted graveyard cocktails Friday night in costumes. That should be a lot of fun. Do you have a costume picked out, Ash, or are you showing up as your normal spooky self?
I will be a narwhal.
Oh my gosh. So we're going to have a purple people eater, a narwhal, and Krampus. You guys cannot miss this. It's going to be a great time.
It's going to be amazing.
Well, that concludes this season of Shat on TV Lovecraft Country. We hope you enjoyed and will join us for future seasons of Shat on TV. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com, where you can listen to every episode of every show we've ever done. You can also email us, host at shatontv.com, or call 914-719-SHAT and leave us a voicemail. On Twitch, we are shatontv.com/Twitch. Go there. You can check the schedule. We'll be updating it. There's the King Bee on there on Wednesdays. Ash and I are on there as well for Shappy Hour, and we have a bunch of one-off episodes as well. So keep an eye on that schedule. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we join our good friend Big D, Dick Ebert, to cover 80s and 90s movies commissioned by you, the listeners. Find past and future episodes at shatthemovies.com. Guys, if you're not convinced that Shat the Movies is a great podcast, just know that every episode is actually paid for by a listener. It's that damn good. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a review so people who are getting into Lovecraft Country years from now know exactly which podcast to listen to. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash Schlafly, Big D, Dick Ebert, and the King Bee, I'm Gene Lyons. Thanks so much for listening this season, and we'll see you soon.